Hi, Nick. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Great to be here. Thank you very much. Hey, everyone.
Hi. Yeah. So Nick, I'm excited for this conversation because you've really transformed a personal crisis into a really thriving mental health engagement business. Your journey from corporate life in some head of sales roles into forging people, that started with a personal crisis back in 2012, right?
Yes, actually goes back a little bit further than that. So
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I, I developed mental illness in my childhood. I developed something called obsessive compulsive disorder. And as I got older in life, it kind of then started to get added into the mix generalized anxiety disorder. So essentially, if you're not familiar with that, it's obsessive compulsive anxiety, essentially. So through education, and it's a great example. We could be highly performing and highly successful, but fueled by high anxiety, fueled by high nervous energy. But you can only run for so long until you stop, and therein kind of lies a problem, James. So in my corporate career, after many years of burnout, over a decade of burnout, I had a breakdown in 2012. And it was at that point I started to use speaking as a therapy initially. And then it kind of got out of hand and became my career, which I'm sure we'll delve into. But that's kind of what's kind of brought me to where I am today. I started to share my experiences of mental illness and mental health challenges, which as 6'4", 24 stone guys didn't do in 2012. And it was then I realized a couple of things, actually, James. I realized I didn't want to be solution focused. So when everybody else shares their stuff with me, because that's kind of what happens when you give people the truth, I felt overwhelmed by everybody else's stuff then. But the bit that really saddened me, because I didn't want to be a coach, I didn't want to be a counselor, the bit that really fueled me and saddened me at the same time was, why is it that when we need help, we don't reach out for help, but we'd be the first to jump to the aid of other people? And that's the bit that fueled me, and that's the bit that really got me, and that's what I started to talk about. I started to talk about the engagement piece, and the rooms got bigger, the audiences got bigger, and I started to travel the world doing this stuff, and the rest, as they say, is history. It also led me to build a business called Forging People, where we look at transformational speaking coaching. So we essentially change people's narratives to change their experience. It's very much a niche, which I'll be really excited to explore with you as we go through this, I guess.
Yeah, really cool. Really cool. I love that story. And yeah, a couple of things you mentioned there. It's interesting to think, for me back into 2012, I guess that's kind of where I got my start in personal development. So really looking into, your inner world and how that affects your outer world. And it wasn't cool back then. Like it was, I was kind of that weird, weird kid in school looking into personal development, kind of kept it quite quiet, but I just saw so much sense in it, looking at, people like Tony Robbins
Yeah.
and his kind of message I just really resonated with. Whereas now it's much more out there, it's all over, there's some big influencers over YouTube and that kind of thing. So it's much more normalized to talk about this kind of thing. Have you found that, because you kind of mentioned that, have you found that throughout those years of, so, as you said, speaking your truth, being more authentic, and then people sort of come out of the woodwork and talk about themselves, and you think, wow, yeah, there's many more people in similar situations.
Yeah, I think there is that. I mean, hence the grey streaks in the beard. I've been doing this a long time, and I think that certainly, I mean, to give you an idea of how rare this was in 2012 for a big guy, a big old guy to talk about mental health and mental illness. I was actually labelled the anxiety guy, as if there was only one of me. I mean, that was kind of, and like you say, now it's very much a common thing to talk about anxiety and stuff. But um, I think essentially, and it's kind of the root of everything that I do, whether it's as a speaker or as in the forging people work, is when you give people the truth, so unfiltered, vulnerably, authentically, people will engage with you with trust and rapport, and they will share everything. Um, and I think that in professional lives, especially, we're trained to give superficial messages, and we don't engage with superficial messages. So for me, speaking on a human level changes everything. But there is a responsibility there as well. And I see this happen in a very wrong way many, many times. It's one of my kind of bugbears, I guess. Lived experience in the work that I do isn't the solution. It's the perfect vehicle to drive engagement to the solution, but is not the solution. So ethically, morally, and for insurance purposes, when people open up with me, I need to really stress that kind of, I'm not there as a coach, a counselor, an advisor. Very often, if you see me speak on stage, that's the first thing I'll say to people. I am there to give you the ammunition to ask better questions yourself. I am there to be the buffer zone to ask all the questions that you don't want to ask anybody else. I'll be that guy. I'll be the buffer zone in between. And that's kind of my part in this. So I make sure that I surround myself with amazing solution-focused people. And really, that was where Forging People started to come from. Having a stable of experts that I can draw on to bring in to complement the work that I do. And suddenly I had a business, and that was really strange and quite an unsurprising and not by design thing.
Yeah, I love that. I really love that. What's been your... How did you get going? How did you build traction in the, when you first started the business? Because obviously jumping into something where you're now a business owner rather than, having your own thing, you were head of sales, you ran some kind of like sales roles and that sort of thing. How did you find that shift, and what did you have to shift in your own mindset and identity?
There's a few shifts actually, James. The first one was suddenly when you had to pay your own expenses, you went a lot more careful. That was the first thing. I guess the main shift was I'm very strange in terms of generally, but I'm very strange because I'm not. Usually, people create businesses and then they go on to be a speaker. I went the other way around. I went from employment to becoming a professional speaker overnight. Now, there was an element of I was kind of doing that in the background anyway. But long story short, I decided to leave employment to pursue this full time. Purely as a speaker, the business was not even a dream at that point. And I felt liberated for about 10 minutes when I left my employment. And then I phoned my wife and said, I've left my job. I'm going to become a professional speaker. You've effing done what? So liberation only lasts so long. So the reality is the mortgage didn't get paid on dreams and missions. So I kind of, I went to work for Tesco. I was delivering groceries 36 hours a week to pay the bills, to take the pressure off, and launching my own business, doing a plan B to get back to a plan A again. And I'm a big advocate of that. But the thing is that sometimes you find yourself in a position where you don't necessarily want to be. Now, I could have quite easily said, I'm not a delivery driver. That's not what I want to do. Dump groceries on people's doors and run away. What I did do is I took a human approach. I put the groceries where they want the groceries, and I told people what I was doing when I wasn't dressed in high vis, the worlds that I'm trying to work in, the opportunities I'm trying to get. And do you know what? In that year that I spent at Tesco, I got 5 bookings off of delivering to lawyers' houses. So telling people what I was doing.
Wow, amazing.
I also got an article submitted in the Staff magazine on mental health. They were asking for articles. And on the success of that Staff magazine article, they put me in a Public magazine. And that went out to millions of households around the country. Now, it was that article that sent me away from Tesco again and kind of out doing my main thing. So attitude is everything and opportunities are everywhere. You just got to keep looking and keep kind of throwing your cap into the ring. And interestingly, I set myself a target. And one of the things that really drove me to start with is I wanted Tesco as a client. I wanted to have that journey from working for Tesco to pay the mortgage to having Tesco as a client. And I think it was November 2022, I actually took on Tesco as a client, their head office, and working with thousands of people in the stores around. So it's an amazing thing to actually say that these opportunities, even though they're maybe not where you want to be at the time, they're still everywhere, and they still give you kind of like real focuses on where you want to go through seeing just exactly where you are right now, not worrying about where you've come from or where you're going. Just look at where you are right now, what doors are open right now. And that's always been the approach I've taken.
Man, I love that. That's absolutely incredible. Love that story. Love how you just embraced, your authenticity and spoke your truth in moments where, most people would shy away. Being a delivery driver at Tesco, and you want to make it into something else, but just speaking that truth, and then all the things, having this abundance mindset is really, speaking to me with what you're saying. Yeah, because it really is true when you approach it with that mindset, opportunities are everywhere.
It is, and it is true. And look, it's not always easy. Let's face it. I mean, there's also been a few challenges that's come from that. So when I first started to assign a monetary value to my speaking, to my work, I was kind of basing it on my hourly rate at Tesco because that's kind of what I last knew. So from a pricing perspective and an emotional connection in terms of your value of your work, that's really hard to say. Okay, well, why do I do an hour's delivery work for 15 quid an hour? And now I'm charging £3,000 to a corporate client to go and do this stuff. So actually, again, I was based in that mindset, that fixed mindset of that one thing, and that was selling my time for an hour. And I had to come away from that. What you're buying is the experience and the value, and what is the experience of bringing you in and what it's going to do for people. So it did create a kind of a mindset shift that had to work through as well when it comes to money. The business, forging people, I mean, that came from a line in one of my early talks that in life, we can either allow our adversities and our challenges and all the rubbish that we experience in life sometimes to negatively impact us for the rest of our days. That's a valid choice. Or maybe we can choose for those things to forge something better. So forge something beautiful, something powerful, something that wouldn't have existed without you going through your stuff in the first place. And to me, that's kind of where it starts to make sense. But that business came from trying to save myself from going back down the road of a breakdown again. Because after about 3 years of, and the busier I became, the worse it became, the worse it come, because I was telling my story every day somewhere, whether it's in a school, prison, a business, whether. Um, there's a very fine line in life, James, between your story owning you and you owning your story. And I was walking that tightrope of going back into my story owning me again because I was constantly retelling it in that sense. So I needed to create something which wasn't about me. And I thought, well, actually, what do I want to do? I want to create something which is about storytelling. It's about transformation through speaking. It's about changing your narrative to change your experience. So I started to help people and coach people, but first of all in groups. And then I started to do individuals as well. People that have been through life changing experiences. So whether that be through terrorism, through military service, through grief, through menopause, through lots of different life challenges that aren't really spoken about from a lived experience perspective, certainly at that point. And I coached them to take it to an audience. And that's kind of where it started. So the business was done by accident. It was done to save me. But it's been one of the most powerful things that I've done.
Yeah, amazing. Again, it's really interesting to think about that because you're out there, you're telling your story, you've got attachment, or I don't want to speak for you, but you're speaking of the mental health issues or issues you have and have had and you're dealing with and growing through and evolving through. So you're kind of you've got to be careful not to create this self-fulfilling prophecy that you're in that, but it's flipping it around and working through that. It's really interesting.
It is.
You're
We are
and
the
you
story.
so you mentioned.
Sorry.
No, sorry, go on.
We are the story that we tell ourselves. And I certainly, I mean, nowadays I work in all across the world in lots of different environments, from the military to the prisons to schools to businesses. But all across the board, the one commonality is we are the story that we tell ourselves. So by nature, we talk ourselves into a losing game by nature. So if we change the narrative, we do change the experience. Sometimes it's tougher than that. You know that if you're a fan of personal development and mindset shifting and stuff, it's a tough journey sometimes, but absolutely doable. But we do become a self-fulfilling prophecy. But one of the most powerful things is that we also become a product of our environment. So it's making sure that we have people in our corner, people around us that align with us, but also challenge us, but challenge us to thrive on our terms. So one of the most simple things is, do you feel comfortable saying no to people you want to say no to, or yes to people you want to say yes to? Or do you feel supported to share an opinion and be allowed to follow that opinion through to an outcome, even if you're going to be wrong? So suddenly you start to see that actually when it comes to speaking, it's not just about being on stage or being in front of a room full of people. It's your ability to truly live a life on your terms. And by default, if you're not doing this on your terms, you're doing it by somebody else's terms. And if that doesn't scare you enough to keep pushing and keep developing, I'm not quite sure what will. But for me, that's the whole essence of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and you know, there's crazy data out there, and we've had a previous conversation about
Mm.
public speaking being, you know, the most scariest thing you can do. People fear it more than death. So it is. It's you know,
We're
it's
screwed, really,
real,
aren't we?
true internal growth.
We fear ridicule more than we do dying. That's a condition of
Yeah,
infidelity.
yeah. Mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, literally the number one fear, which is yeah, it's unbelievable.
Mm.
That's yeah, but it just goes to show, you know, how much courage it takes to go out there and speak publicly, and yeah, the growth that you get from that personally is incredible.
Do you know what it is? I think it's more important than that. And I was saying this yesterday. I was working with a summer retreat yesterday for young people through the Lord's Taverners and cricket organisation. And I was saying this, that actually I would say that speaking is life. It's not just about business or education, or it's your ability to deliver any message to anybody with clarity and power and emotion. And your ability to do that will have an ultimately defining impact on your own success by your own definition of that really subjective word. Um, so it's
Mm,
crucial for me. If you really want to truly live a life, have a business, have a career on your terms, your ability to speak and have a voice in a very noisy world, and asking yourself the question, are you truly being heard in a very noisy world? Are you truly being heard? And if the answer is no, then we're not living a life on our terms. But in my years of coaching people to speak publicly, I've not met
mm,
anybody who was afraid of public speaking in its truest sense. We're not afraid of public speaking. What we're afraid of is, it's very human, it's very base. We're afraid of being dismissed or judged or ridiculed for having an opinion, for sharing a belief. And it's certainly been
mm,
compounded and amplified by things like cancel culture, the ability to not share an opinion. So we kind of keep our opinions in, or we keep the questions that we want to ask people in. And for me, that's a really dangerous place to be when we have to feel that we cannot show the world our true selves in that sense.
mm. Yeah, amazing. And yeah, I mean, I truly believe that the world is a better place when people are more authentic. They're more, you know, in there speaking their truth, in stepping into, and it takes so much courage to do that, to overcome those fears.
Yeah.
And I actually think yeah, that's what life is. It's life is an evolution of choosing love over fear in ever more challenging circumstances.
Yeah.
So it is. It's dissolving those fears internally that you are not necessarily born with. You kind of you kind of take them on as you grow through life. And yeah, you said, you know, working with young children yesterday. Yeah, it's amazing. So you work with such a diverse,
Mm.
you know, different people from all walks of life. So you mentioned, you know, working in boardrooms, working, like, say, with the likes of Tesco, working in prisons, working with children. How do you maintain the message, the authenticity, while serving such a diverse audience?
So the message purely comes from, firstly, staying true to yourself. So staying in your own lane. I don't profess to be an expert in anything that's outside of my experience. So I find community and commonality with audiences very quickly by working out what that kind of common denominator is. So yesterday with the children, 10-year-old, 12-year-old boys, what's the commonality? Well, to some, I do a lot of work in the gaming community. That really appealed to them. I work with professional footballers. That appealed to them. So I was trying to find the common denominator, which allows them to kind of buy in. But really, that's quite superficial, because the message
Mm,
is the fact that I'm not there to advise. I'm not there to give them the Nick Elston take on things in terms of solutions. What I'm asking them to do, regardless of who they are, is to listen to what I'm saying in terms of my experiences, the experiences of people that I've spoken to, and see what resonates with them. It's not about me, it's about the receiver, actually. The way that I do that, show up and to be human, actually, so tomorrow is a great example. So tomorrow I'm working at the Ministry of Defence Rehabilitation Centre for the UK in Loughborough. Like, people have been through the worst things in life, back for rehabilitation in some of the kind of more worn-torn areas of the world. Who am I to go and rock up and talk? Well, actually, I'm a human having a human experience. They're a human having a human
Mm.
experience. So even though that if you are doing that kind of comparison thing, which we shouldn't do, but we do that. Who am I to think about this when they got these going on? The reality is, I'm only there to sow the seeds of better questions. I'm actually there to encourage them to take ownership and to tell their stories, because other people will benefit from the value of their experiences. So if you look at things like mental illness, nobody wants to be walked through mental illness in a talk. That's just weird. But what they do want to learn is, how did it change you? How did it inspire you? How does it change the way that you see the world? How did you get better? So those are the things I think the speaking addresses. So the answer is commonality and community, regardless of the audience, are the two things you need to find. But everything else is just humans having a human experience, open conversations, sometimes one-to-one conversations after the event. And what you'll find is that actually humans are essentially good, despite what you hear on the social media and popular media. Humans do want to kind of engage and support you and everything else, but only if you give it the chance. So by going in without any filter, in that sense, regardless of the environment, we have big open conversations.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I love that, and it's a fundamental belief that you have that humans are fundamentally good. You know, it is, and it is true. You've got to really, get that and see that, and yeah, having a human to human experience, like we share so many commonalities. The stories might be different, but the underlying emotions and everything that we experience as humans is there's only so many, patterns and emotions that people run. So yeah, relating through your authenticity is just is key. It sounds like
It is, and I think that this is why I go back to storytelling and being a product of our environment. So I was speaking at the police conference in January, and this came up about actually that very often, that being a product of our environment, people are not dealing with the person that's at police aren't dealing with the person that's in front of them, really. They're dealing with the environment that they've come from to be in that position where they're in front of them. My first experience of working in the prison system, because again, I'll always be honest with you, the first time I walked into a prison, I've had no personal experience of prisons directly or indirectly before. So all my reference points are from the Shawshank Redemption or the Green Mile. So my expectations of walking into prison were very different, because do you know what the most surreal thing was? If you took away the security, it felt like every other university that I work in. The demographic was the same.
Mm.
But interestingly, when we dug
Mm.
down into, I do a program called Find Your Voice from Inside, and when we dug down into the stories, hand on heart, to some of those stories, could I have gone down that road if one twist or turn a different way? Maybe. We never know what people have
Mm.
experienced. And this is a thing about human conversation. Being vulnerable actually allows you to see the true journey of somebody. And that's not to excuse everybody.
Mm.
And obviously, like in all walks of life and all parts of life, you do get people that are just not great sometimes. But very often that's been attributed to something that's
Mm.
happened in the past, um, in my experience.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, again, I love that. I love that. Is that part of what you do? You mentioned there putting yourself in their shoes to understand and empathize, and is that part of like your methodologies when you go in and train people and coach people?
Yeah, I think it is. It's certainly trying to see. I always say that one of the most powerful things we can do is to kind of craft our stories from a third person perspective. So very often, if we're
Mm.
talking about our stories, we will say, "I did this. This happened to me," and I always say that if you write your story as if Morgan Freeman were narrating your life, how cool would that be? By the way, um, you'll start
Mm.
you'll start to see the value of your experiences when you write down your experiences. Like, this happened to Nick, this happened to James, this is how James reacted. You start to see there's value in the experiences you had. So instead of being owned by those, you can share that insight with people that are really keen to learn from you. I mean, you look at kind of even in business growth and business journeys, so many times we have superficial conversations. I had such a great conversation with somebody this morning who works a very similar space to me, but I'm always a collaboration over competition. I always take a collaborative approach to things. So we had a great chat. And when we said to, "Oh, how's business?" let's be honest, most people go, yeah, it's great, it's really good, thanks very much. And it's, even if it's not, you know what I mean? So, but he said, actually, it's tough. It is tough at the moment. He's had to pivot and he's had to do this and he's had to do, and I said to him, yeah, definitely this year is kind of like you had to run a little bit faster to stand still, but we're still here. And I love that kind of honest conversation, because the reality is, if he just would have said it was great, I would have said it was great, and everyone moves on not learning anything. But actually, we learn from each other. Actually, what's working from him, what's working from me, and we can kind of go, actually, that's a really good idea. So yeah, I think even in professional conversations, honesty is everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just going back to that, I love that. Imagining Morgan Freeman narrating your story, that would be epic. And I'm getting Shawshank Redemption vibes again.
Yeah,
It must be.
exactly.
You must really like that film. It's a great
Yeah,
film.
absolutely. But I mean, there is, if you wanted to take, so obviously you've got a lot of people that are kind of entrepreneurial mindset and people that are interested in growth. So if you really wanted to get kind of like a commercial with this, I would say a 14 sides of A4 is around a 50-minute keynote if it was delivered verbally. So 14 sides of A4 is 14 chapters or 14 blogs. 14 chapters is a book. A book is a business. A book is a Netflix movie. You never know where this stuff goes. But even if it goes nowhere, to write the story of your life from a third-person perspective, for me, is one of the most transformational things we can do.
Yeah. I love that. You're inspiring me to go away and start, writing the stories of my life.
Do it.
Yeah. No, really are. Because one of the things that, and this I learned this from a great mentor of mine, but to help out, just one little thing to sort of help overcome that fear of judgment of others is I am the star of my movie. We are all the stars of our own movies, and everybody else is just extras or supporting cast at best. Like your closest family and friends, but we are all living through that lens if we choose to be, and not get sucked into the drama of some big like what's maybe happened over the last 5 years or so, just big dramas that people get sucked into, like whether it be in big news events and that sort of thing. But then you're not the star of your movie anymore. You are just an extra in some big dramatic disaster movie that's not your own. You're not in control. You're not co-creating that script. So yeah, I love those analogies that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's really important. So I read a book a little while ago now called The Fifth Agreement. I'm not sure if you've ever read it. The Fifth Agreement for me
No, I don't think so.
It's basically been my. Gosh, you've got a copy here. Actually, it's not my book, so I'm not selling anything. It's this one here. It's been one of the most game-changing things that I've read in a long time. And essentially, it's talking about what we're talking about, being able to see your life and your experiences without kind of judgment or the judgment of others, or stepping back from waiting for permission to do things. And it works on 5 very simple principles. And I love that. I mean, I did a LinkedIn post today as we record this today around. I was walking around a garden. I'm a bit of a nerd. I walk around National Trust properties like the weekend. That's a good way to chill out for me. So I was walking around. I saw this big sunflower with a bee in the middle of it, and kind of regardless of what's going on in the world, he was just kind of cracking on, doing his bee thing, like whatever bees do. I prefer bees to wasps, and wasps sting me. I was just watching this bee, and it just come into my head, like, he lives in the same world as us. He lives in the same existence as us, but he's just kind of cracking on with his thing. He has no influence over anything else. And it seems quite a small example, but it did remind me of actually what we've got so much to contend with on a global level right now, but zero influence over those things. So for me, it's just about kind of trying to crack on with our little sunflower of the world and do the best that we can. And I think that mindset allows you to have some mental distance from getting caught up in the news 24 hours a day. I mean, if I put you down in front of Sky News now, other news channels are available in case there's lawyers watching. If I put you in front of Sky News and I come back to get you in 24 hours time, you're going to feel a lot worse than you do right now, because the two things are sex and fear. And it's sex and fear on repeat. If you've ever watched a news channel for more than 3 hours, it's repeated at least once on those kind of stories. And I
Mm.
think we need to be really mindful of that. What goes into our eyes and our ears has an absolute impact on how we feel. It's the reason I choose not to be on Facebook. I'm not on X. I'm not on TikTok. I only exist on LinkedIn and YouTube. And YouTube is really only as a place to dump the video content. So you don't have to be
Mm.
everywhere. In business, I mean, we get told that you have to be everywhere. You have to have. You don't. You just your attention goes. Success flows from where your attention goes. So my attention goes exclusively on LinkedIn. I have a huge kind of connection base on there. Pretty much all of my business comes from LinkedIn. So we don't need to be everywhere. And mentally, it's so easy to switch off then. Whereas before, up until May 2020, I was getting pings and notifications and beeps and whistles from all these social media apps all over the place. Does your head in. I think because when you have I
Mm.
certainly find running a business which I'm emotionally invested in. So whether it's as a personal brand or the forging people stuff, I have an emotional connection with these things. So I feel things a lot. So I work in
Mm.
a very heavy space, even though I try and do things differently. It's still responsibility is heavy. So yeah, absolutely, it's an emotional energy thing. So the last thing I want to do when I switch off on an evening at the weekend is go and scroll through social media because I feel a lot worse than I do 20 minutes later.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with you, and I mean, I'm so tuned out that some people will engage with me. You know, I'm having an intro call with somebody, and they'll talk about something that's happened in the news right now, and I have no idea because I'm so tuned out. Maybe I'm too tuned out at times because I'm really clueless. And yeah, like you say, there's an important distinction with social media as well when you're growing a business, growing an audience. Is you're like you're a producer, you're not a consumer. So you know, even regardless of whether you're on Facebook or Twitter or what have you, you would be that you are a producer and you're only on there to produce, to give value, not really consume and get sucked in. You're not really, well, I can't imagine that you're there scrolling news feeds too much and reading stories and that kind of thing like most people out there. So
I
yeah.
don't even scroll home feeds on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm literally that selective.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Exactly the same. But yeah, really interesting. And you, yeah. So you mentioned, you know, being honest about the challenges of growing a company
Yeah.
and the challenges that you face, and when you put that out there and you're honest with other people and you're collaborating with what you could see them as competitors, but when you collaborate, you share strategies and ideas and give and receive value. What kind of challenges are you facing right now when it comes to growth? Like what's the big challenge that maybe isn't working at the level that it could or it should?
I think for me, I've become a victim of my own success. I think because most of my career was built building a personal brand, that's kind of what people want in that sense, because that's
Mm.
kind of how I built it to be, which is an amazing thing. But I'm 47 now, so I've got one eye on what's the exit strategy from all this. Um, Not yet, but when we get there. So in the back of my head, I need
Mm.
to build something which doesn't need me in it. I need to build something which doesn't necessarily need my time, and that's kind of where my focus is right now. For the longest time, interestingly, I would say for about 8 or 9 years of my journey along the path, my biggest challenge was actually having the mindset still of being the best second in command I could be. I was always brought up and went into careers where I was the best second in command. I was there to support other people. So entrepreneurship and self-employment never came easy to
Mm.
me. I always had this big red eject button, like ready to go, like I'm going to go and do something with somebody else. But now it's shifted to actually, this is me. This is what I want to do. This is the mission. Um, I don't have any kids. I have a small Shih Tzu. Um, so legacy is the work I create. The legacy is a stamp I'm going to leave on this world. So actually, if I don't want it to go with me, I need to create something which I founded, forging people, but turn it into something which doesn't need me in it. And that's kind of what I'm working on right now.
Mm. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I'll be honest with you. I didn't imagine you having a little Shih Tzu. Like you're a big dude wearing an Iron Maiden
Yeah.
t-shirt. Like that wasn't the dog that I was
Yeah.
imagining you
Oh,
had.
she's been very she is a little Shih Tzu usually, but she's been very well behaved at the moment. So no, she's my little girl, my little 12-year-old girl. But she's funny you mentioned the Iron Maiden thing. People won't believe me right now because of the T-shirt, but I'm actually a country music fan at heart. Weirdly, so I
Oh
got brought
wow.
up. My mum loves country music, and my dad loves heavy
Mm.
metal. So I'm this weird hybrid of, depending on what day it is, what mood I'm in. I can have Ozzy Osbourne on, Iron Maiden, and then it'll be kind of Garth Brooks. So yeah, I'm happy. But music is, do you know what, music is really powerful. I do. Anybody who's done any of my work, any of my courses, I do something called the walk-on exercise. I love to ask what yours would be, actually. So, if I were introducing you to the stage, what would your walk-on music be?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It was that I'm kind of stealing this one straight out of Snatch, but it's the Oasis. It's actually called "Fucking in the Bushes." Don't pardon
Yeah,
my French,
brilliant.
but it's that. It's
Yeah,
it's just a complete
yeah.
hype up tune to get you geared up. But yeah,
And what a movie as well. I love Snatch, one of my favourite films.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'll leave it there. I'll end up doing some really dodgy accents if I carry on. So let's just move on from that. So.
But you're absolutely right. Music's another one. Like you were talking about. We were talking about news and social media, and music's another one where you've got to be selective over what you're choosing to program with yourself. What mood you're getting into. What are the lyrics even? Because you don't necessarily want to be. You don't want to be listening to sort of country and western when you are trying to get energized for something that you've. Or maybe you do. I don't know. It's the same sort of thing.
There is a disclaimer. Country music isn't always about losing your doggy and missus. A lot of it is, to be fair, but a lot of it isn't. So I do. So funny enough, my walk-on track is by a guy called Luke Combs, and is "Ain't No Love in Oklahoma." So if you listen to the track, it's very much a kind of. So when I hear that track, I'm kind of primed to do something. That's my walk-on music. So that's been for about 18 months. I changed it after 9 years of walking onto the Monster by the Automatic. What's that coming over the hill? That one, yeah. So, but yes, music is such a big part of that, I think. So if you like Morrissey or the Smiths, it works the other way, as you say, you can bring you down. But choosing that kind of, this is what I love, that walk-on music track. So having a song which just represents you at your best, your fighting song, the one you would kind of go into war to, that kind of, having that in your armory, for me, is a really simple thing that we can do. It kind of stacks the odds in our favor a little bit. Changes our state.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Again, I love that. What's
And by the way, I'm not sure I'm not sure if you're picking up on this,
sorry,
but where I live, we've still got kind of like rag and bone men. The people go around and pick up the scrap metal, and he's like calling from his lorry.
Oh, really? Wow.
It sounds like some call to Mecca or something. There's a guy walking around trying to get his scrap metal. So if you can hear somebody over a tunnel with a broke kind of Irish accent, that's it. That's nothing weird, I promise.
No, I can vaguely hear something in the background, but that's incredible. You still have a rag and bone man. Wow, that's insane.
I literally live in the deep south of the UK.
Awesome. Yeah, so growing the company, obviously, your time and capacity, you've built up, your own personal brand, so everybody wants you, and you're looking to now, what's the future, what's the exit value, how can I strategize towards that, how can I scale something that's not relying upon my time, my capacity, my brand. What are your kind of thoughts there? What are you looking at doing?
So the immediate one, and I think a lot of people kind of lent into this, especially since COVID and lockdown and stuff, is the online programs that people can access. That's kind of like what I'm working on right now. That for me, from a forging people perspective, there's only one of me, and even if I had 10 trainers, there's only 10 trainers. So, but there's so many organizations and institutions out there that I think could really benefit from the material I've created. So I'm going to be doing something like train the trainer and education packs, that kind of stuff that I can kind of sell to end users to train, sell to trainers and coaches to go and deliver for me, or for them, but kind of my materials. It allows me still to kind of keep the brand, but also it allows a bigger reach as well. So that's kind of the things. I think it's the two things I'm looking at: is online and train the trainer kind of programs.
Yeah, it makes sense. So it's leveraging the brand that you've built in a way where you're almost productizing certain things that you can then leverage for other partners to come in, other associates that can leverage the brand and still do the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, productizing is great. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned it. Productizing for me has been crucial. I think a lot of people struggle to sell speaking, especially in the UK. Um, I always say turn your talk into a product. So my career as I said, sales manager, account manager, head of partnerships was always productizing things. Really, I was selling an off the
Mm.
shelf kind of product. So I've always taken that same approach with speaking. So um, if anybody out there at the moment is speaking but really struggling to commercialize or go pro, because it's one of the best things you could do to represent a business as well, to become a key person of influence, to build your visibility and credibility, to speak at industry events and things. But if you're struggling to do that, I would say create a signature talk which you turn into a product. So if I give you my kind of
Mm.
first iteration it was called Talking Anxiety. So I gave it a name, I gave it a one-line synopsis, I gave it a paragraph, I gave it 7 learning points, a speaker overview. I put graphics to it. I basically turned it into something that people could just buy because they know what they're buying. Most people, especially in my space, they go down the road of making the mistake, and I think it is a mistake, if they try and sell too much in one go. So I do a lot of work with people leaders, HR directors, and that kind of stuff. So I do a lot of content creation for people like CIPD. So most of my work is done in that space. Now, if I go to them and say, I've got an amazing program and it's going to be brilliant for your people, that's a really big decision for them to make because I'm offering an elongated thing. They don't know it's going to work. What I do is I say, first interaction with any client, I say, I'd like to come and deliver this talk. It's there to amplify engagement in what you've got going on. I'm not there to replace anything or disrupt anything. I'm there basically to get people that maybe not engaging right now into the things that you've got to help people. Makes it a really easy decision for them. It gives them an off-the-shelf price for that one talk. And all of my retained business, so people like Tesco, for example, so all the companies I now work on retained agreements with, started from one talk. And then once you're in, they may like you, you have rapport, you have trust, and then they go and ask me to do other things to the extent where, can you deliver a session on menopause? Now, I'm not your obvious candidate for a session on menopause, but they like the way that I host and they like the way that I deliver. They wanted my style, but they wanted that to address a topic. So I brought in an expert on menopause and we had a really open conversation. I asked the questions that a lot of men are afraid to ask. So I kind of use myself as like a stooge in that sense. And people like that because it kind of gives them that human
Mm.
experience. And I think that really ties into that lived experience angle as well.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I love that. It makes so much sense as well. How do you see the corporate mental health engagement evolving? You know, where is it at now? What are your thoughts there, and how do you see it evolving over the next few years? And how are you kind of positioning yourself for that future?
I think how it is right now, I think certainly there's a lot more conversation. Um, there Up until the start of this year, I would say there's a lot more uptake on bigger projects. I think due to the decisions that Donald Trump and Elon Musk made in scrapping DE and I budgets, which doesn't largely cover the work that I do, but it does have an impact on what I do. Some of my work comes from those kind
Mm.
of budgets. So I work a lot with American organizations. So that certainly impacted that, the slashing of budgets, even departments that deal with DE and I and any initiatives. Um, that's been a challenge this year, I must admit. But generally, I think that people are more open to considering lived experience as a really valid way to increase engagement in what they've got going on. So employee assistance
Mm.
programs and counseling services, they're all amazing things to have, but unless you get the engagement, nothing changes. So I would say there's a bigger focus now than ever on engagement as opposed to purely just making sure you've got a tick box of solutions in place. The next step, and this would be really interesting to see
Mm.
how it plays
Yeah,
out,
makes sense.
is the integration of AI into workplace well-being and to see how that plays out. I'm personally very excited by it. I think there's a lot of, even for people like myself who are speakers in the space, there's a lot more opportunity than there are challenges. Um, if we adapt these things in the right way and kind of come on board to amplify and complement those solutions coming on board that are maybe AI driven or app driven at least. So yeah, I think that's kind of where it's going, is actually seeing where AI fits into the mental health world as well.
Yeah, really interesting. What excites you most right now? What are you most excited about?
I think I'm most excited about actually trying to build that business which doesn't need me in it. I think for me, it's not only would it be liberating for me to design something which helps to employ other people, which I've never really done in a big way. I've worked with freelancers for a long time, but I've never employed. That gives me a chance to do that, and also to build that kind of copyrighted, trademarked kind of materials that I can then give to other people and send out into the world, and maybe even further afield than the UK as well. That excites me. I guess also what excites me is what it frees me up to do, because if it's freeing up my day to day, then it's allowing me to do more and more kind of things that I choose to do, whether that be more premium offerings in terms of speaking, whether it's more traveling and working, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's just really exciting. I mean, I've always built this, I guess, by winging it. I've never really gone with an end goal in mind. And now I was starting to think about that. I guess it's kind of, yeah, it is exciting actually, kind of thinking that trying to build something which is exitable is a really weird motivation, but it's worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible to think you. I mean, you're being humble, you know, when you say you've built this by winging it. There's no way you winged it from going from, you know, driving, being a Tesco driver to taking them on as a big client. There's got to be intention and something around that for sure. But
yeah, I'll take that. Thank you.
But yeah, you mentioned AI as well, you know, in the industry, and how do you see that impacting? Do you see that helping with your scale in your business? Like, what are your kind of thoughts there?
Well, it does now. I mean, I'm not one of these that kind of automatically pour scorn on some things they don't understand it. I like to get to know things and see how it works and how it kind of figures out. I think there's a couple of things. I think the first thing is it's great for me personally right now to have in place for the roles that I do want people in place for eventually. I do prefer having the person to interact with. I didn't want to have a team of people, not to have a team of people, and if that makes sense at all. From a mental health space, I think there's I call it the trilogy. I like to say that there's a space where I even apply this to my personal life as well, being honest with you. So you have personal development, you have coaching and counseling, and then you have AI. So what you find is that depending on where you are and your access to things like whether it's funding, whether it's access for a large organization, you may be able to have a coach. You may not be able to afford that. So personal development could be reading, could be listening to podcasts, whatever that may be. The third thing is counseling and therapy and that kind of skill set where it's professional help absolutely needs to be in place. But I think AI could be the bit in between. So I call it the sanity check. So I can dump into, I've kind of built a custom GPT based on the Fifth Agreement because I am that nerdy. So basically, I can day to day, if there's something that isn't really worth going to a coach or a counselor about right now, but it's just still something that's in your head, it kind of gives you a little bit of validation just by airing it and seeing what comes back. In the way that I've trained it to respond, it's critically, it's objectively, and making sure it's aligned with the bigger picture overarching goal. I think that trilogy could work really well, but as long as nobody is making kind of like complete decisions on one of those things. So coaching and counseling work brilliantly for me. I have a mentor, a coach. I have a counselor that I will call on if needed. Day to day, I think AI fills like a little bit of a gap that in between, there's something that's just in your head in a minute, you can kind of type it in and it's there with a response. So yeah, that's kind of a really rambling answer to a very short question. So sorry about that, James.
No, it makes complete sense because No, it makes total sense. I love that. How yeah, there's like an intersection of three things that I'm almost imagining a Venn diagram there, and it's very much like that, and allowing AI to ideate. You've trained it on something that
Yeah,
you kind of know what good looks like. The good questions to ask. You know what good looks like because you know the material, so you
yeah,
can kind of get a gauge without just totally relying on the output to be gospel. And then
yeah,
you've trained the model, you've trained the AI on that, so then it allows you to rapidly go through as a brainstorming session. You get the ideas, you get the answers to certain questions, and you think, yeah, that's really insightful. It's a different perspective. And
yeah.
then and it's all part of that ecosystem, like you mentioned, the three different things. It's not just solely reliant on AI is going to become the sole coach for that you rely on. So yeah, it makes complete sense.
It's also good for my rabbit holing as well. So I love rabbit holing, where I take a topic and I just dive into it. So this is probably going to be for
Mm.
another episode, but things like kind of the simulation theory, uh, that I and kind of it's a great place to have non-judgmental conversations. Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Nick,
I've always taken the approach. Not sure about you, James, that personal development for me, I've always tried to avoid engaging and listening and speaking with people that are not like me, people that are like me. So we end up in that kind of echo chamber. So everything that I read, everything that I listen
mm.
to are from people that are not like me, who have a different race, sexuality, identity, culture, different beliefs. Again, things like kind of simulation theory, that kind of stuff. So I love learning about things that just really aren't on my radar. And I think for me, that's one of the best things we can do from a personal development point of view, off our own backs, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, Nick, I can't believe you brought that up right at the end of the podcast, because every
Yeah,
ounce of me now is restraining from going down that rabbit hole. Because
yeah,
I'm right there with you. Like I
yeah.
go down these exact. I love the thought experiments. I love using AI for that use case. Just brainstorming, giving different perspectives. A really fast way to do research on things that it used to be um, Googling things and then clicking buttons and going into a bunch of different web pages. Whereas now you just got this all encompassing,
Mm.
and it's based on your questions and that kind of thing. But yeah, that's definitely for another podcast, because I could talk all day long about those kind of rabbit holes for sure.
We'll do that.
What sounds great. Last question. What's your advice for founders building businesses, business owners, around deeply personal experiences right when you kind of got started? I'm sure you had this abundance mindset, but I'm sure you had self-doubts and that sort of thing kicking in, and I'm sure it wasn't just all plain sailing and smooth. What's your advice to them?
So my advice actually is around emotional energy, because I think if our emotional energy is in a good place, we can deal with pretty much anything that comes our way. It's when it starts to dip that we start to develop a lack of self-esteem, a lack of confidence, a lack of belief. So I would say, every day, imagine you are a battery. Are you 10 out of 10 fully charged, or are you 1 out of 10 running on fumes? And if you're on the lower end of the side of things, what does it take to get you to as much as you can, so that you go out in the day fully prepared? So yeah, all the things that I don't do are good for you: sleep, hydration, nutrition, and exercise. I don't do that, but as a disclaimer to you, James, do those things; they're amazing. Um, but there's things that you miss. So try this exercise. If I want everybody here to get a big sheet of paper, I'm an ex-stationer, so I still say paper. Put your name in the middle of it and put all the parts and players of your life, and then write down your emotional connection to all of those things. Do these things deplete you?
Mm.
Do they nourish you? Do they lift you up? Do they bring you down? If anybody gets divorced, take me off the billing. I was never here, James. But really set on a mission to get to know yourself again. So actually, what you do is that when your energy is in a good place, you could bring in the things that maybe you've been putting off. But maybe if your energy is a little lower, like today, so I've had a really busy day yesterday. So today I'm taking it a little bit like kind of like third or fourth gear after this. So I'm going right down, and I'm going to be doing some really low kind of minimal energy tasks, maybe just chilling out a little bit this afternoon, so that tomorrow when I'm with the MOD again, I'm good to go. So imagine you're a battery, and work that way. Focus on one thing only. It's emotional energy.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I love that. You've inspired me to go off and do that as well, for sure. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It's I do find yeah, the energy management side is more neglected than, you know, the time side, you know, looking at your calendar and thinking, how can I optimize this? What
Yeah.
actually gives you energy? What feeds your energy? What drains you? How can you maybe delegate or just totally delete things that drain you, that aren't, you know, they're not necessarily moving the needle when it comes to growth and running a business? So yeah, love that. Perfect example, solid advice.
Yeah, I think
Where can
with the thing
people
is
find out? Sorry,
sorry,
go
yeah,
on, Nick.
just quickly with good energy, you can turn like 4 hours work into an hour. If you're anything like me, if I got good energy, if I'm in a good place, I can get. Otherwise, we just kind of sit there for 4 hours or do something for 4 hours with poor energy. It's just not efficient. So even from a time perspective, it's just not efficient to run on low energy. So you may feel guilty about taking 2 hours off on a Tuesday afternoon, but you'll feel nothing about working till midnight one night. So be careful what you're beating yourself up over.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, really appreciate this conversation, Nick. It was super interesting. You've shared a lot of, you know, great wisdom and insights that come from your experience. So I love that. Where can people find out more about you?
Nice and simple, just like myself. NickElston.com. Everything's there.
Yeah, nice. That's it. You got the domain, so that's great. Perfect.
Yeah. First tip to anybody who's looking
Yeah,
to go
well,
pro as a speaker: buy your name as a domain name.com.
well, yeah, you must have got in early. You've either got a pretty unique name, or you must have got in early, because
Yeah, I did get in
they're
early.
all taken whenever I look.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks so much again, Nick. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your insights. And I'll be watching your growth. And yeah, I'll be watching your growth with great interest.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, likewise.